Video games often get different releases on different platforms with a variety of changes, and Rayman is no stranger to that. Some versions are better than others. Here are the best ways to play each Rayman game. Rayman 1 is a big one, and quite frankly the reason I wanted to make this video. Most people know of either the PS1 port or the PC port of this game, but there are a handful of others ranging from good to bad to god-awful. The DSi port, for example, is okay. The GBA port isn't very good, and the Atari Jaguar port is excellent. In fact, that's my answer to this entry. I'm working on a video explaining every reason why it's the best, because it's really a big rabbit hole to go down. But for now, I can say with certainty that if you haven't played this port, which admittedly you probably haven't because it's very expensive, then you're missing out. From better sliding physics, jumping physics, to ledge and platform placements, the Jaguar version strips away any of the unfair issues that Rayman 1 had on the PS1. Now I know a lot of people love the difficulty in this game, and I commend that. I don't love it, and I felt very vindicated when I found out just how broken the PS1 port actually is. You see, a lot of the unfair jumps that require pixel-perfect precision aren't meant to be like that. The boss fights with unfairly tight areas to avoid weren't meant to be like that. The Jaguar version had it right. There are some downsides, like the fact it cost a fortune, so really you're just emulating on PC if you do this, but other than that, and the music being a little bit worse, you've got the best Rayman 1 experience right there. There are a plethora of issues with the PS1 port, specifically that it just wasn't playtested properly, and they didn't realise that they'd messed up basically the entire level design of the entire game. And yeah, that's kind of a big issue really. Rayman 2. It's a touchy subject for a lot of people. People love the PS2 port, you know, Rayman Revolution. Other people don't. So this is a lot more subjective. If you like the more open world aspect of Revolution, the extra encounters, the power-ups, mini-games, etc., then Revolution would probably be your answer. I personally don't love that version, which is fine. You know, we all have opinions. I prefer the level-based structure of Rayman 2. Regardless of that, the PS2 port does have issues. For example, you're playing it on a PlayStation 2 and the frame rate is exactly as you'd expect from a PlayStation 2 game. Terrible. Anyway, the Dreamcast really is home to the definitive edition of Rayman 2. It's the main game with every level intact, delivered through a linear narrative, but this time it's an island of doors instead of the Hall of Doors. That's not the only benefit though. Rayman 2 on the Dreamcast has a couple of extra cutscenes, way more environmental elements, a higher frame rate, and extra collectibles that lead to a new area with minigames. That makes Rayman 2 on the Dreamcast not only the most smooth and enjoyable way to play, but the most feature-complete version as well. It's really as simple as just saying, this port runs at 60 FPS and it has a higher resolution. That, at its core, means you're going to have a really great experience playing, and more or less single-handedly means that the Dreamcast is the best way of playing Rayman 2, because stuff like the PC and 64 ports, there's not a ton of differences. Dreamcast has got the edge, but really, with this one, it's all down to performance. I just wanted to take a moment to say a massive thank you to everyone who subscribed recently. I hit 5,000 subscribers just the other day, and it means so much to me. My next big milestone is 10,000, so if you want to join me and help me reach that goal, now would be a great time to subscribe. Thank you very much. Now back to the video. Rayman 3 has far fewer versions than the predecessors, but that does not mean it's without some differences. There really are only two key versions of Rayman 3. The original release on PC, PS2, GameCube and Xbox, and then the HD port on PS3 and Xbox 360. I mean, there might be a third one, but hey, look, I'm going to give the theory territory of a Rayman 3 remaster a break for now because it's just getting tiring and painful and embarrassing. Anyway, I would absolutely love to say the Xbox 360 HD port being played on the Xbox Series X is the best way to play because that just seems sensible, right? But it's not. The HD port has issues. I've made a whole video about these issues, so I won't go too deep into it now, but there are bugs, graphical issues, missing elements to the game. It's not the best port, and sure as hell not the best way to play the game. So that leaves really just the 4 original ports. And I do have an answer as to which is the best. It's the GameCube one. The PC port is it's a PC port, you know, it's not perfect, but it does allow you to use mods and potentially run at a high resolution and frame rate, but it's still a PC port. I'm not anti-PC at all, but, you know, in 2003, console ports were typically what games were made for. They're the refined experience. Hell, did you see Spider-Man 2 on PC? It's literally a different game, because they were trying to avoid piracy, so they just made a crap game on PC so that people were like, oh, when I pirate stuff it doesn't work, I may as well just buy the console game. Really stupid. Anyway, I'm always inclined to never say a PC port is the best way to play a game, simply because they're usually the least well optimized version of the game. There's something going wrong always, and frankly it's not worth the hassle. I appreciate it's not always the case, but even with big high-end PCs, getting some games to work is a pain, and it's just not worth doing. But why is the GameCube port better than the Xbox and PS2 ports? That's what you really want to know. Well, it actually has more features. Kind of. The PS2 port is as good as any PS2 game of that era. Like, it looks fine, it runs, barely, it's serviceable. The Xbox port is certainly more stable, but you have potential bugs every now and then. Not commonly though, like it doesn't matter. However, the GameCube port, as far as my experience goes, is fairly stable. As stable as any other port, at least. But if you link a Game Boy Advance to the GameCube, you unlock a couple of new minigames. Now I say a couple, technically it's 3, I mean at least that was the plan. For the second minigame, you need to have completed the GBA port of Rayman 3 and then plug the Game Boy in. However, the Game Boy game doesn't actually save at 100% completion, so it's not possible to access this minigame in the main Rayman 3 without cheating. Woohoo! As is the case with so many games of this era, this stupid bug has rendered this minigame kind of lost to time. Sure, you can play it with cheats, but like 0.001% of people who played Rayman 3 will even know this one exists, let alone have played it. It's cool nonetheless, and makes the GameCube port technically the definitive edition of Rayman 3. Until the remaster that I'm definitely still saying is coming out, but I'm not going to talk about it in my videos anymore, at least not until Ubisoft do a Ubisoft Forward. Anyway, goodbye, moving on. Rayman Origins has the fewest ports of any of the mainline Rayman games. It's up for debate as to why, but really it just got overshadowed by Rayman Legends. They're very similar in a lot of ways, and Legends is just newer and flashier, so Origins kinda got lost in the fog. As such, it never had any kind of re-release beyond standard backwards compatibility. Just PC, PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, PS Vita, and the 3DS port. I know I said just, and then listed 6, but you get the point. Anyway, there aren't a ton of differences between these. There are a couple that aren't as good, but nothing horrendous, and nothing spectacular in any of the other ones. Well, I mean, the game itself is spectacular, so really, all of it is, but you get the point. As such, I do have to go with my own best personal experience with the game, since I have played every single port. God, I need to go outside. The Xbox 360 port of Rayman Origins leads you to the best experience in my opinion. I've already said my thoughts about PC ports, and yeah, you have modding and potentially higher frame rates and resolutions, but you also have to play it on a PC. Swings and roundabouts. This leaves the Xbox 360 and PS3 ports as the other two high definition versions, which, you know, that's really what you're looking for, considering there are very few differences between any of the others, and it is as simple as boiling it down to two main things that give Xbox the edge. I mean, I guess 3 things, but the third one is really just personal preference above objectivity. I prefer the Xbox controller. I think the PS3 controller feels cheap and tacky and bad to hold, but I do have massive hands, so that's probably why. Anyway, the legitimate reasons are that the Xbox 360 port was just more stable. I found it ran a bit better. I got a few frame rate drops in the PS3 version, and none in the Xbox port when I played it on the 360. And I was on one of the earliest consoles, not the arcade one, but the next edition, you know, the first one with an HDMI slot. So playing it on the base console, you get a better Xbox experience already. But at the end of the day, you can run Rayman Origins on an Xbox Series X through backwards compatibility, and oh my lord, it runs well and looks good. I played it twice on Xbox and countless times elsewhere, and I have to say the best performance and experience I ever had was on the Series X. It's the best way to play the game in my eyes. Moving swiftly on. Rayman Legends is the reverse of Origins when it comes to having different versions. For this one has a fair few, and they're all quite different. PC, Wii U, Switch, Xbox 360, Xbox One, PS3, PS4 and PS Vita. However, this one is a hell of a lot easier to answer. In fact, it's the easiest of all to answer. You know how I said the Dreamcast port of Rayman 2 was the definitive edition and I used those words? That was me saying that. Well, Ubisoft themselves used those words for the Switch port of Rayman Legends, and they called it the definitive edition. And yeah, I mean, they're right, it absolutely is. It's kind of a widely agreed upon fact that the best versions are the Wii U and the Switch ones, and I'm here to tell you that the Switch one is better. A lot of people say Wii U, but really the Switch port contains all the Wii U's content, plus every costume, extra kung fu functionality with online multiplayer, and it doesn't force Murphy down your throat quite as much. He's still there, but he's a little more optional in places. I know a lot of people love the touch controls of Murphy, and that's cool, you can do that here. But you don't have to, and that's a key thing the definitive edition does better. I like being able to control him with a button, if I have to at all, you know, I really just don't want him to be there. So having that choice is nice. Otherwise, most other ports are pretty identical, really. Xbox One and PS4 are going to run better than the 360 and PS3. PS Vita is pretty solid, and the PC port, fuck me, that was so hard to get running. It just didn't work for me, ever, still, and I've used 3 different PCs to try and run this fucking thing. They each have unique costumes, but really, it's not a big game changer. Anyway, that's my list. Let me know what you think down below, and of course, tell me your favourite versions of each game. Have you played them all like I have, like a very, 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 very sad man with too much time on his hands? Look out for the companion video to this, where I discuss the worst versions of each Rayman game. Some of these are rough, so it'll be a fun one. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, stay purple, stay limbless, stay awesome, and I will see you in the next one.